the stolen file.
Jump in 10 seconds.
It details the incomplete process of synthesizing a cure for the virus. If implemented in its current state, the produced substance may be extremely toxic.
Now!
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we'll be taking a look at the HARRAN virus, which was featured in the incredible Dying Light, which was an open world zombie survival game developed by Techland and published by Warner Bros. In the game, you play as undercover agent Kyle Crane, who has been sent to infiltrate a quarantine zone in the fictitious city called HARRAN, where a virus had broken out, turning the local populace into zombies. One of the most impressive things about this game is your ability to traverse the urban environment overrun with the HARRAN virus, scavenging for supplies and weapons, as well as completing missions which progress the overall story. Not only is the world open for you to explore, but the way in which you do it is so exciting, with the introduction of parkour mechanics, which enable you to climb up ledges, slide, and jump from the rooftops to escape the hordes of undead that were close on your tail. The game also features a fantastic element that rapidly raises the stakes. The day is scary enough with hordes of infected strolling through the city looking for their next meal, but during the night is where they truly come alive. When the sun goes down, the infected, which had been somewhat restrained by the UV rays, come to life, bursting with energy and the desire to hunt you down. And it's during this period when you're trying to escape the now hyper-aggressive zombies that you get exposed to even more terrifying variations of the infected. Now, as mentioned before, the city of HARRAN had been plagued with a rabies-like pathogen that spread to epidemic proportions, leaving the small population of survivors to deal with the horror that had now befallen their city. The HARRAN virus itself was mentioned as being an apparent mutation of rabies, with an intolerance to light, as was demonstrated with its weakness to ultraviolet radiation. This light intolerance was also exhibited more extremely by some of the more mutated victims of the virus, who were inherently nocturnal, and could be seen being repelled by UV flashlights, UV flares, and the UV lamps that surrounded the safe zones. The transmission of HARRAN would occur via the introduction of an infected individual's bodily fluid into the bloodstream of a healthy person. Here the virus would replicate and spread exponentially before it completely consumed the host. Direct fluid exchange through the form of a bite from an infected person was enough to guarantee infection, and the only way to avoid this was with the immediate amputation of the limb which had been bitten, as was the case with both Karim and Errol Hassani, who were able to survive being bitten by following this procedure. The symptoms of infection would initially include seizures, fatigue, and blurred vision, prior to giving the host a malnourished and pale appearance, and the rate at which the body would succumb to the infection would vary from person to person, ranging from a few hours to days, depending on the immunity levels of the host. In the game, it's not explicitly stated or explained what specifically happened to an individual throughout their process of turning. However, we do know that after they've turned, the host would enter the first stage of the virus, which left them with most of their motor skills intact, coupled with an uncontrollable rage and hunger for flesh. And it's implied that due to the rate of behavioral degeneration between the different types of infected, the virus essentially worked by attacking the neurological system, laying waste to the brain over time, prior to genetically mutating the host to serve its desires of spreading indefinitely. The origins of the virus are not clearly explained, which has led to a rise in theories. I will, however, mention that there are some clues given to the potentiality of it being caused by aliens. According to David, who was a conspiracy theorist living in HARRAN, the epidemic was caused by the Gaboids, who he believed were an alien race that introduced the virus with the aid of mutagenic meteors which had hit the city a few days prior to the spread of the infection. Despite the HARRAN virus's lethality and level of unpredictability during its outbreak, it was shown to have another weakness other than UV, which was called antizin. Now, antizin was essentially a synthetic viral suppressant, which temporarily stopped the HARRAN virus's progression and helped to relieve symptoms, though it wasn't a cure for the virus itself. Unfortunately, if antizin was not administered in time, the infection would transform the host into the first stage, called virals. As previously mentioned, the virals were those that had recently been turned, and while they did not display restraint towards attacking their victims, they bizarrely have been shown to plead for mercy when being attacked themselves. They are incredibly aggressive and have the ability to sprint at their targets, and surprisingly did not bite their victims, choosing instead to pummel them into oblivion. They were seen to be highly sensitive to loud noises, which lured them and the rest of their kind, and were shown to be capable of dodging attacks, only possible due to the fact that their brain had not completely been consumed by the HARRAN virus. The biters were the next stage of infection, and essentially made up the majority of the mindless zombies that could be found on the map. Unlike the virals, they would wander aimlessly and sluggishly towards their targets until they were close enough to lunge at them. Clearly affected by sunlight, during the day they would remain extremely slow. However, the night would see them display greater aggression and more agile movement. The toads were essentially a result of the HARRAN virus's mutations, granting them the ability to spit toxic fluids from a distance, which allowed them to deal damage from range. And while they preferred to attack from a distance, they were relatively easy to kill with a few well-placed hits. Bombers were another result of the virus's mutative abilities, creating hosts that had unstable organs which were exposed. Once a bomber had spotted you, they would then jog over to your location before detonating in a devastating blast that would not only injure you, but would also serve as a signal to lure more infected to your location. We also have the massive gas tanks, which were infected scientists in suits that had been part of the initial special cleanup unit dispatched to HARRAN. The gas tanks were just as slow as the biters, and were unable to bite due to their protective masks. However, unlike any of the other variants seen in the game, they carried red oxygen tanks on their backs, which could be set off to destroy them and all other zombies within the immediate vicinity. This leads us into the most terrifying and most powerful of the infected found in single player, which were the Volatiles. These infected would only emerge at night, and while the rest of their kind could be easily killed with a few blows, the best strategy when dealing with Volatiles was running to the nearest safe house. This was due to the fact that they were both able to take several hits from high-powered weapons, as well as being able to cause significant damage themselves. A terrifying sight to see, they featured broad shoulders, an exposed ribcage, and disjointed lower jaws, much like the Reapers featured in Blade 2. Of course, I couldn't talk about the Volatiles without mentioning the Night Hunters, which were a sub-variant of the Volatiles, and were a player-controlled species found in the Be the Zombie mode in multiplayer. The Hunters were able to howl, which revealed the location of nearby survivors, and were able to use their tendrils to traverse the urban environment at great speeds prior to catching a victim. One of the best open-world experiences that truly sets the benchmark for zombie survival games. Dying Light is a memorable, anxiety-inducing exploration into the zombie genre that we all love. Well, that's all for today, folks. If you haven't played the game, I've left a link to where you can purchase it below. Thanks to all of you guys who requested we take a look at the HARRAN virus featured in Dying Light. If there's any other content you would like me to check out, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
The eyes of the world have been glued to the city of HARRAN for the past 2 months, following the outbreak of a previously unknown pathogen.
The question is, are there still non-infected survivors in the city as the GRE maintains? And if so, will the Ministry still go through with a stated plan to annihilate the city in an attempt to wipe out the HARRAN virus once and for all?